September 1, 1943. Rabaul Airfield on New Britain. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai hesitated with his hand over the intelligence file, his single functioning eye having lost the other to American gunners 12 months before picking out lines that made him laugh aloud within the muggy operations tent. The Americans had developed a new fighter aircraft, as massive as a bomber and with the width of a transport plane. Its name was Hellcat. According to our intelligence, its weight is double that of R-0. Yet another instance of flawed American engineering. Through the open tent flaps, he gazed at his squadron's A6M-0s arranged on the pierced steel runway. Elegant, agile, and lethal. For the past 2 years, these planes had ruled the Pacific airspace. British Hurricanes, American P-40s, Dutch Brewster Buffaloes each had fallen under the Zero's firepower. The most recent American challenge, this unwieldy Hellcat, would meet the same fate. What Sakai was unaware of, as were all the other Japanese naval pilots assembling for their day's briefing, was that precisely 30 days from then, this so-called failure would begin the systematic destruction of Japanese naval air strength. The F6F Hellcat would score an aerial victory ratio of 19-1, downing 5,223 enemy planes while losing only 270 in combat. It would revolutionize carrier strikes, shatter Japanese air supremacy, and demonstrate that the Zero's era of dominance stood on dangerously flawed assumptions. The equations governing aerial dominance were about to be changed by a fighter that appeared ungainly, felt heavy on the controls, and broke every convention the Japanese had brought to perfection. Nevertheless, within half a year, those same flyers now mocking intelligence bulletins would find themselves penning final farewells to home, fully aware that facing Hellcats now meant near certain death. The highest point of the rising sun. The self-assurance of the Japanese Navy in September 1943 was not mere pride. It was mathematics. Since December 7, 1941, the Imperial Japanese Naval Air Service had earned kill ratios that seemed incredulous. At Pearl Harbor, their losses numbered 29, with 347 enemy aircraft destroyed. In the Philippines, only 7 lost for 103 shot down. Over Darwin, just 2 lost and 30 destroyed. The British Far East Fleet's aviation wing wiped out. The Dutch East Indies Air Force crushed within days. Central to this air superiority flew the Mitsubishi A6M-0, a machine that had radically altered the notions of fighter design. When Americans examined captured models in 1942, their own engineers initially dismissed the flight data as implausible. A fighter boasting bomber-like range, biplane-like agility, and enough weaponry to down any opponent. It defied all logic. Warrant Officer Hiroyoshi Nishiwa, later recognized as Japan's top ace with 87 confirmed victories, wrote in his recovered diary about the Zero. "Flying a Zero," he said, "feels like donning wings. It reacts to your intentions instead of just your control inputs." By contrast, American aircraft felt like cumbersome trucks, strong but unrefined. Their fighters are produced like their cars, ponderous, over-engineered, inefficient. The Zero's extraordinary performance resulted from groundbreaking design ideas. Ultra Super Duralumin, a secret aluminum compound, provided a framework that was 30% lighter than similar American planes. The cockpit lacked pilot armor. No self-sealing tanks increased its mass. Occasionally, even the radio was omitted to save 30. Every gram was sacrificed for agility. Intelligence disregarded the signs. The initial intelligence about the F6F Hellcat reached Japan through neutral Swedish channels in early 1943. The specifications appeared to be either propaganda or possibly intentional deception. The plane's loaded weight reached 12,186 pounds. The Zero's weight was 5,800 pounds. The wing surface measured 334 square feet and was paired with a high-drag radial engine. It was equipped with 2,400 rounds of ammunition, armored plating throughout, bullet-resistant glass, and self-sealing fuel tanks capable of holding 250 gallons. Captain Minoru Gender, recognized as the tactical mastermind behind Pearl Harbor, examined the specifications at the Combined Fleet Headquarters. His assessment, stored in Japanese defense records, was contemptuous. The Americans have not gained any new insights. The Hellcat signifies the persistence of their flawed doctrine, seeking to counteract pilot ability with increased machinery weight. A Zero will easily outmaneuver it. The calculations seemed to corroborate his conclusion. With a wing loading of 22 pounds per square foot, the Zero had a 612-foot turning radius. The Hellcat, on the other hand, had a wing loading of 36.5 pounds per square foot, indicating a turning radius exceeding 900 feet. In a close-quarters maneuvering battle, fundamental to all Japanese fighter tactics, the Hellcat would be at a disadvantage. The initial sighting occurred on September 30, 1943, at Marcus Island. Petty Officer First Class Yoshio Fukui was escorting a reconnaissance flight when he observed them. 6 dark blue aircraft were climbing out of the southeast. The first idea that crossed his mind, as documented in his after-action statement, was B-25 bombers following an unusual bearing. But when they turned, he recognized the unique shape: a single-engine craft, a large fuselage, wings that looked too abbreviated for the size. He later wrote, "First sighting with F6F type fighter." His first thoughts: the Americans had fitted fighter guns onto a torpedo bomber, flying with customary tactics. Customary tactics involved exploiting the Zero's exceptional turning ability to get behind the adversary. Fukui executed a diving roll, expecting the heavy American fighter to maintain a straight path, letting him maneuver onto its tail position at 6 o'clock. Yet, an unexpected event took place. The Hellcat did not flee. It avoided attempting a typical turn with him. It chose a vertical ascent. Powered by the Pratt & Whitney R28000 double Wasp engine putting out 2,000 horsepower, 700 more than the Zero's Nakajima Sakai's 1,130 horsepower, the Hellcat ascended at 3,500 feet per minute. Fukui, trying to follow, watched his own speed drop sharply as the Zero fought to climb. At 15,000 feet, the Hellcat performed a feat supposedly impossible for an aircraft of its mass, executing a hammerhead turn and dropping directly behind Fukui. The American fired at a distance of 400 meters, as Fukui reported. 6 machine guns discharged, rather than the 4 previously anticipated. The weight of fire was unlike anything experienced before. Fukui's plane absorbed 17 bullet strikes within 3 seconds. He was able to escape only by intentionally spinning his aircraft. Fukui lived, just managing to return to Marcus Island with his Zero badly shot up. His wingman, Petty Officer Second Class Masao, failed to make it back. The reconnaissance aircraft under their protection likewise did not return. The Hellcat drew first blood, bringing the weight dilemma to the fore. On October 5, 1943, Task Force 14 attacked Wake Island. Lieutenant Yoshio commanded 12 Zeros from the 252nd Air Group to counter what seemed like another minor American incursion. For several months, American carriers had launched these quick strikes and retreated before Japanese planes could fully respond. This time, events would change. "We ascended to 20,000 feet, Shiga wrote in his personal diary. Below us were 12 F6F fighters organized in 3 groups. We possessed every advantage: altitude, positioning, surprise. Success appeared guaranteed. The ensuing battle would demolish Japanese tactical beliefs. As the Zeros descended towards the Hellcats, the American pilots held their line rather than breaking formation or trying to maneuver. They stayed in formation, picking up speed in a mild dive that conserved their momentum. When the Zeros started shooting from the farthest distance, hoping for fortunate hits, the Hellcats took the hits without dispersing. The Hellcat's defensive features included 212 pounds of armor shielding the pilot, 110 pounds protecting the oil system, and fuel tanks with self-sealing capability that could withstand many strikes. As the Zeros ran out of bullets during their diving attacks, the Hellcats began their own assault. Rather than turning to engage in a turning fight, they made use of their heavier mass. By climbing at maximum throttle, They reached heights where the Zero's power plant had trouble getting enough air. Up at 25,000 feet, the Hellcat's engine was still creating 1,650 horsepower. The Zero's engine produced just 900. They dropped on us the way hawks swoop on sparrows, Chagall wrote. The extra heft granted them speed we could not match. They would dive, unleash volleys from those 6 fearsome guns, then soar out of reach before we could respond. 8 Zeros went down. No Hellcats were destroyed. This was the prophecy of the Marianas Turkey Shoot. November 11, 1943. Rabble. The 204th Air Group's gathered aviators listened as Lieutenant Commander Dao Tanimizu explained the Americans' flying methods. With 32 confirmed kills, Tanimizu was one of the rare pilots who had lived through several clashes with the Hellcats. Erase everything you believe about aerial warfare, he instructed them. The Americans have shifted the paradigm. They refuse to play by our terms. They approach combat like executioners, not traditional fighters. Tanimizu detailed what Japanese aviators were gradually and fatally beginning to realize. The Hellcat was not built to outmaneuver the Zero. It was made so it would never have to. Implementing a combat strategy called energy fighting, Hellcat crews retained their altitude and speed, converting stored energy to movement in quick, slashing strikes that robbed Zero pilots of any opportunity to exploit their agility. They operate in pairs, Tanimizu said, with one up high and one down low. While one draws your attention, the other is already diving to attack. Their radios, which we mocked for their extra bulk, allowed for flawless teamwork. We fly as lone samurai. They act as a unified machine. The Technology Divide, December 1943. Trail Lagoon. Commander Mitsuo Fuda, previously in charge of the strike on Pearl Harbor, now held the post of Air Operations Officer for the Combined Fleet. His examination of damaged Zeros returning from skirmishes with Hellcats highlighted the widening gap in technology. The difference in firepower was a matter of calculation. The Hellcat carried 6 Browning M2 machine guns, each capable of firing 750 rounds per minute, for a total of 4,500 rounds per minute. Every .50 caliber bullet had a mass of 46 grams and left the barrel at 2,900 feet per second, imparting 3,500 foot-pounds of force. The Zero's 27.7 mm machine guns discharged bullets weighing 11 grams at 2,300 feet per second, delivering 750 foot-pounds of energy. What was even more alarming were accounts describing American fighters being directed by radar. While Japanese aviators still depended on visual detection to find adversaries, Hellcat pilots received directions from naval radar operators who could monitor Japanese planes from as far as 50 miles. Lieutenant Sadamu Kumachi recounted his initial experience of an interception conducted by radar guidance. We were climbing up through the clouds when they struck. No advance notice, no sighting of the enemy. Hellcats came down from above, right on our path, in perfect tactical position. They had exact knowledge of our location, height, and heading. We were like the blind-facing opponents who could see in darkness. The equation for the pilot. January 1944. The crisis among Japanese pilots was approaching disaster. Before the war, the training regimen for Imperial Navy pilots was considered the most rigorous in the world. Training lasted 3 years, and pilots entered combat having logged 700 flying hours. Army aviators had received at least 500 hours. These men became masters of dogfighting, schooled in aerobatic maneuvers, marksmanship, and the moral philosophy surrounding aerial warfare. However, by early 1944, Japanese naval aviators were going into action with only 300 flying hours, and Army pilots with just 200. Because of fuel scarcities, much of their instruction took place in gliders. Only 50 rounds per pilot were allocated for gunnery drills. Training in formation flying, flying by instruments, and radio operation was all discarded to expedite pilot deployment. In contrast, American aviators arrived in theater with a minimum of 300 hours, including 50 in their operational type. They had expended thousands of rounds during training, performed carrier landings until these routines became instinctive, and honed their energy tactics safely above the airfields of Texas. Lieutenant Commander Yoshihiro Hashimoto, serving as training officer at the Kasumagara Naval Air Station, recorded in his final assessment, "We are sending children to confront seasoned experts." Only yesterday, Ensign Yamamoto reached the front. He had never discharged his weapons while airborne. No ammunition existed for rehearsal. Night flight was unfamiliar to him. "We lacked the fuel for such exercises." His first engagement lasted just 7 minutes.